Hey guys, it's Fernie here. Just thought I would do a quick video on some of the announced dungeon changes for Season 4 Mythic Plus. It was finally data mined and announced that Season 4 is going to be all the Dragonflight dungeons, minus Dawn of the Infinite, which I think most people kind of expected, because we haven't had a full season of Dragonflight only dungeons. We've had, half in Season 1 and then half in Season 2. So it makes sense that for this one, they would throw them all together. So this will be our first season fully with all Dragonflight dungeons, which is kind of exciting, at least in my opinion. So let's go ahead and see what some of the changes are. I can already think of some problematic abilities, and I hope that they're being changed. Some bosses like Croth could use some changes in Algothar Academy. The last boss of Neltharis, I don't even remember her name. Extremely annoying. Anyway, we will see. So, starting with Neltharis. Chains. Burning Chain now stuns enemies for 5 seconds, was 1.5 seconds, and deals no damage but increases damage taken to mobs by 50% for 5 seconds. Okay, this is a really good change, I think. If you have watched any high keys or done any high keys, the strategy was pretty much pull an entire hallway into the chains, and then you use 2 to 3 chains depending on how high the key was, and it would kill all the trash entirely when pulled properly. And honestly, was not a fan. I wasn't a fan of all the weapons in Necrotic Wake. In Shadowlands, I think they do a little too much, and the Burning Chain in Season 2 was awful. It did way too much damage. It was ridiculous. So I'm glad that this change exists. And it feels like it's not really a negative. You're still getting something. You're stunning them for 5 seconds, and they're taking more damage, so you could still do some good setup, but it's not just going to kill them ups for you. So that sounds perfect. Alright, Chargath. This is the boss in the right hand wing, the one that does the chains. Fiery Focus now deals high damage to the tank every second until the cast ends. No longer does AoE damage to players around him. Okay, that's another good change. One of the annoying things about this was that you were trying to kite him through chains, but the boss has a 5 to 8 yard circle around himself that does pulsing AoE damage while he's fixated on the tank. So now the damage has been allocated from that AoE circle to just the tank, which is fine. The tank normally took no damage during this, so I think the tank having to pop a CD perfectly acceptable. He didn't really do any other tank mechanics otherwise, so this gives the tank something to do. And if the DPS are trying to kite chains through him, they don't have to worry about the AoE circle under him. At least that's how I'm reading this. No longer does AoE damage to players around him. Yeah, so overall, sounds pretty good. Warlord Saga, this is the last boss. Curse of the Dragon Horde debuff only lasts 30 seconds, but now stacks was 5 minutes. Okay, also I think a pretty good change. The curse was from looting one of the items that you had to use to break the shield in the middle phases. And when you picked it up, you got a curse. The curse was 5 minutes long, so you either needed a decurse or you just had to leave it and heal through it. It was not a lot of damage, but it did add up over time. And so it being only 30 seconds is great. Even if it stacks, that's fine because you can just cool down through it. If you really need a decurse, you can bring a decurse. Feels like it's a lot less required. 5 minutes is punishing, but 30 seconds, doable. Healing CDs plus defensives, perfect. Dragon's eruption radius reduces 6 yards. Oh my god, thank you. These fucking meteors were awful. They changed them, I think, twice during the season because they were hitting too fast, and two, they were too big. They were actually bigger than the graphic that was displayed, so you would think you're out of it and you would still get nailed. And if you died, this boss was pretty much over. You needed every single person to have an item to break the shield. Until you learned about the people could pick up 2 item tech, which came later in the season, but losing someone on this boss is horrendous because it's so hard to break the shield. So that's a good change. I like it. Smaller meteors. There's already enough of them. The room is a shit show. Doesn't need to be huge. Okay. That's a good change in Neltharis. I like this. I really can't think of any other trash mobs or anything that would be oppressive in this dungeon, so overall pretty good. Magma Tusk got nerfed multiple times. That was one of the harder bosses on Tyrannical, so this one might be okay now. Alright. Azure Vault. Trash, Arcane Tender's Erratic Growth. Cast time increased to 3 seconds, was 2 seconds. These are the flowers at the beginning of the dungeon. They cast it and it puts a stacking dot on people. Longer cast time, sure. That's a pretty decent nerf. Generally, people were pulling the Arcane Tenders with the Crystal Golems, which do that frontal. So having more time to do kicks that sounds perfect. It's fine. Good nerf. A lot going on in those pulls because all the lashers cast it, and I think they're always in groups of three or more. Like generally, if you pulled that entire room, was it either 6 or 9 lashers. I think it was 6 lashers plus 3 golems. It got pretty crazy. So this is nice. Dragonhead Breaker's Shoulder Slam now hits all players within 8 yards. Was primary target. Increases physical damage taken by 10% for 12 seconds and ignores line of sight. So these are the big Draconid mobs after the second boss, between bosses 2 and 3. A lot of people used to do skips. It used to be you could jump down from the second boss's platform to the third and skip most of these. These are really deadly unfortified. I think people were losing the charge near the end of the season if you had to pull them, but if you pulled them natty, they were terrible unfortified. They hit so fucking hard. So Shoulder Slam now hits all players within 8 yards. What does that mean exactly? Does it still pick a target and focus on them and then cleaves around them? I'm assuming that's what it means. Ignores line of sight. Okay, so you can't loss it anymore, so they're intending for you to take it. That seems like it could be really difficult, unless maybe like your tank could block for you or something. Maybe there's a mechanic like the BRH is it Smash Spite, where he charges someone. If you stand in the line of sight, you take the charge first. Maybe that's the intent. I can't really tell from this. That's hard to say. Okay, we'll just have to wait and see about this one. Azure Blade. This is the second boss. Summons the images, does the giant frontal cone, and shoots out the arcane orb. And then in the middle phase, spawns 4 images and is the bullet hell. Probably my least favorite boss in this dungeon. Maybe my least favorite of the Dragonflight bosses, but overwhelming energy ticks every 2.5 seconds was 2 seconds. Okay, so the intermissions are a little slower in terms of damage tick. That's great. On Tyrannical, a lot of healers struggled. If you didn't have a good kit for this, it was a really fucking hard boss. Basically, if you got hit by anything, you would instantly die combined with this damage. So it being a little slower, that sounds perfect. Overall, good change. I kind of wish there were less projectiles, but that's beside the point. So, Umbrel Skull, which is the last boss, the Crystal Dragon. The big crystal on Crystallize now also pulses AoE damage every 1 second while the shield is active. Oh, so they're just adding damage to it? So what happened was it would spawn multiple crystals, and Crystallize was a big one that would spawn near the tank and required a little more damage into it to kill it. There was like 3 or 4 small ones and then one big one. And now it sounds like the big one is going to pulse AoE damage, so you might need to prioritize that over the small ones. I mean, okay, sure. People are already doing creative pulls to try and get these into like little clumped locations so that you could AoE effectively. If you were spread out, it was hard as hell to get them done. Like the only thing that could really cleave them effectively was Chain Lightning, and like who's bringing in Ellie Shaman. So overall, okay changes. I'm really curious about this Breaker one. I'm glad that they didn't remove any of the CCable stuff. Like I'm glad that you can still knock the golems up and stop them from their frontal. Seems like things are still stunnable. That's good. You never want to see them make things CC immune. Okay, Algothar Academy. Is this spelled wrong? Should this be an E? Am I dumb? Anyway, buffs. Blue Dragonflight Pledge Pin now increases mastery by 1109. This makes sense. Mastery was like a flat value, and so now they're just scaling it up to go up in accordance with your item level. That's great if you're a mastery user. So the trash. Unruly Textbooks Monotonous Lecture cast time increased to 3 seconds. Spellbound Scepter's Mystic Blast damage reduced by 40%. And Corrupted Mana Fiend's Surge cast time increased to 2.5 seconds. So this is all of the trash going to Veximus, the elemental on the left. And there's multiple of these in pretty much every pull, so having more time to kick sounds great because most of these required, 3 to 4 kicks, sometimes more. You needed like 2 melee kicks per mana fiend, and then the monotonous lecture where the books would cast it every like 10 to 15 seconds, and if it went off, it would put them to sleep. It was effectively a stun. Mystic Blast was like kind of a group wipe if it was fortified. If the scepter got it off, it would just kill everybody. So damage being reduced is cool. It's less deadly. Cast time increased on the other two spells. More time to deal with it. Perfect. Ooh, Croth. Okay. Firestorm radius reduced to 5 yards. Great. Again, another meteor boss that the graphic was bigger or smaller than the actual meteor. So reducing it to 5 yards is perfect. This boss was hell, especially on Tyrannical. Savage Peck, initial damage reduced by 13.3%, periodic damage reduced by 33%. Oh, amazing. That is amazing. This boss absolutely destroyed tanks. Can't say enough good things about this change. It's going to be much more manageable, especially ones who can't get rid of bleeds. If you don't have an evoker in your group, this was awful on Tyrannical. Okay, an Echo of Dorogosa. This is the last boss. Unleash Energy. The Echo of Dorogosa unleashes powerful arcane energy, inflicting arcane damage to all players and opening arcane rift in nearby locations. This is just what spawns the rifts. It sounds like they're just adding a flat burst damage to it. Um, Depending on the scaling, it could be fine. There wasn't a lot of damage going out otherwise. I don't think there was like the pole didn't do AoE damage. The breath was dodgeable. The orbs are intended to be dodged. So this is just adding something for the like it's basically just giving the healer something to do. I mean, fine, sure, whatever. Doesn't seem super impactful, but healers will be a little more engaged on that last boss. All right, moving on to No Coot Offensive. A lot of trash changes. Disruptive Shout now actually has a 40-yard range as intended. Me. So this is the first set of trash near Granith, the dragon boss, which normally people went to first. Well, that's not true. Sometimes people went to the Storm Elemental first. But anyway, this is Granith trash. This was a, I think it interrupts, yeah, it says interrupt spellcasting. I mean, sounds like it wasn't hitting at 40 yards as it should have been. Normally you just, I can't remember. Is this the one you knock up or do you just stop casting? This might be one of the lieutenant mobs that you can't interrupt. I actually can't remember too well. But obviously 40-yard range on spellcasting interrupts is pretty deadly for casters and healers, so have to watch out for that. No Could Thunderfist Deadly Thunder. Cast time reduced to 3 seconds. These were trash mobs at the end that people generally skipped. You flew over them from the side, and you kind of cut in there. You did not really bother with these. It was a very long stun if it hit people. I think you could stun or knock them up. I don't think you could kick this one, so cast time reduced to 3 seconds. So they're casting faster. Interesting. I think people are still going to skip this trash, at least if it's not fixed that you can fly in from the like the left-hand side after the burial mounds. I don't see people doing this trash because this trash is awful. Corruptor's Death Bolt damage increased by 50%. Cast time increased to 2.5 seconds. So this is the burial mound trash. Most of the corrupt or the casters do some kind of like bolt. Sounds like it needs to be kicked. It's more of a priority. Damage increased by 50%. It's a little slower. There's a couple things happening. There's Desecrating Roar, Death Bolt, and I think is it Swift Wind, Mystic Wind. There's one of the mobs there cast a haste buff on everything around them. That's like the priority, and then it sounds like these two are kind of secondary. But yeah, have to watch out for this Death Bolt. Desecrating Roar now summons 5 dogs, was 3, so you definitely want to get this kicked or knocked up or something stunned. The dogs are pretty annoying. You don't want more summons happening. Also, the Beast Caller Sundering Slash now increases damage taken by 20%. Ugh. That's a pretty big tank buster. Might have to kite these. 20%'s a lot on that trash, especially on Fortified. That trash hit pretty fucking hard, so kind of scary. Warahuna's Hunt Prey now increases damage by 150%. I think this is when they commanded the birds to fixate on a target. This is also Granith trash. It could be Soothe. I think it was an Enrage, so it could be Soothe, or you could stun it. You obviously didn't want it going for your healer because in some of those big, 10 plus mob pulls, it was very easy to lose track of it, and it would just murk a healer or caster. So need to pay attention to the birds a little more. Balara's Ravaging Spear travels 417% faster. It's a really arbitrary number. This is like the lieutenant mob at the end of the dungeon, right before the last boss. Maybe there's some weird overlap situation where they didn't want a slow spear comboing with something the other con mob did. I don't know. Very odd. But overall, good changes. I mean, I feel like the bosses were already have been pretty nerfed in that dungeon. They nerfed bosses 2 and 4 a couple times. The storm elemental was really tough. So adjusting some of the trash, some buffs, some nerfs, kind of mixed results here. I liked Nokud, so we'll see how it goes again. Old Man, one of my least favorite ones, honestly. Lost Vikings, just too long. Lost Vikings, Fiery Surge, damage reduced by 50%. This is when the pirate ship comes out. Whenever the cannonballs hit the ground, they do damage. It's pretty much the only raid damage event in the fight, so if you dodge the avoidable stuff, this is doing less damage to you. That's perfect. That's the only change in Older Man? Wow, I really would have wished they would have modified some of the bleed trash or the bosses with bleed. Or honestly, that dungeon is just a fucking slog on Tyrannical and Fortified. Gotta be my second least favorite. My least favorite is Halls of Infusion. Okay, containment apparatuses. Shouldn't that be apparati if it's... Oh, because it's possessive. Okay, containment apparatuses, containment beam damage reduced by 41%. Cool. These were the orbs at the beginning that could focus you and just beam you to hell. And if you were unlucky enough to get targeted by more than one, you pretty much died instantly. And these had no spell lockout to them, so they were incredibly deadly. So this is a good change. Watcher Iridius is the first boss. Titanic Fist range increased to 50 yards, was 15. Okay, so now it just works like this is his tank slam that stuns. It works like a tier. Tier's tank frontal hits really far in front of him, so you'll just want to make sure it's faced away from range. Fine. I mean, sure, don't stand in front of a boss. It's like, rule like number 1 in most of Mythic Plus. Moving on to Brackenhide. So again, another dungeon where they could have changed like the dragon trash between the frog boss and the third boss. They could have changed how the last boss's phases worked, where it's like percentage based instead of time. Not a fan of those. Those are going to be big pain points, I think. But yeah, we'll see. Maybe they'll do more changes. Anyway, Brackenhide Hollow, Trash, Bone Bolt Hunter, and Rotbow Stalker's Bone Bolt damage reduced by 33% and duration reduced to 6 seconds. This is great. These mobs, you avoided them as much as possible. You never wanted to pull them. They would decimate your entire party on Fortified. Again, Stalker's Bone Bolt Volley also. Cast time increased. It is 5 seconds now instead of 2. That's perfect. This trash is awful. You never went down the left side because there was a fuck ton of this trash. And I think the one pull before the third boss, is it Gut Slash? Gut Shot, maybe? I can't remember the name. I think it's Gut Shot. The one with the hyenas. There was one optional pull where you could pull stalkers, and you mounted up and ran around it, or mind soothed it. It was just so awful. So Decayed Elder Decaying Roots cast time increased to 3.5 seconds. This is just a generic cast. Kick it. If you don't, it roots you. You can dispel it. Didn't do a lot of damage, but sure. Oh, haste reduced. Okay, I didn't realize there's a haste reduction. So cool. More time to kick it. Stalker's Rotten Meat now throws rotten meat instead of scented meat. I don't know what that means. Is that like a flavor tooltip? Okay, weird. Rot Hexer's Decay Totem Withering no longer stacks and reduces haste by a flat 2% for 20 seconds. Was a refreshing duration that stacked. Oh, this is great. So the totems that the Rot Hexers drop, they stacked up every second, and I think it was 2% haste per stack, and it would stack up to 10. And if you got hit with it again, it would stay at that 10 stack and refresh the duration of the dot. So now it doesn't stack at all, and it only reduces haste by 2%. That's like so minimal. Like, who even cares about dispelling that now? I mean, cool, sure. Really annoying spell. Glad that that's changed. Stink Breath's Violent Whirlwind radius reduced to 6 yards, was 7. Okay, so this just means more melee can hit him. This is the guy after the second boss. When you're crossing the bridge, he does a frontal and a whirlwind. It sounds like more melee should be able to hit him now with that radius reduction. Cool. Hatclaw's Warband. This is the first boss. It's the trio. Gash Frenzy now only lasts 15 seconds. Oh, thank you. This is like one of the most punishing tyrannical mechanics, where you really wanted to bleed dispel, or you had to instantly pop a health pot. If you ticked for more than a couple seconds, your healer was not catching up and you would die. But 15 seconds, you may be able to cool down through it and live, even if your healer can't get you topped. So that's nice. Marked for Butchery, this is where he focuses on a target. I believe the rogue like teleports to you and just slams you into you a bunch of times. You needed a defensive for this, so now deals damage every 1 second. So it's a 50% nerf in damage. So it's going to hit you 4 times. Cool, that's good. There's a lot of burst there. Predatory Instincts now increases haste by 5%. Was 10. I mean, so it's less effective. I actually don't know what was this buff doing. Who is it castable by? I don't know which mob casts it. Do they all cast it? Is it when they get low? It might be when they get low HP. Because a lot of times when there are council bosses, they like try to disincentivize you killing one and just nuking it. They want you to kill them equally. Maybe this is a way, like, if it gets low, the other ones get haste or something. I'm not sure about this one, so kind of interesting. Decatriarch, Rathai, this is the last boss. Withering Rot damage reduced by 16.7%. That's great if you miss a totem. It was not an instant wipe, but it was very difficult to catch back up. So this is a good change. I liked Brackenhide. I grew to like it a lot. The first boss was definitely the hardest, but if you get past that, you were pretty well on your way. And lastly, Ruby Life Pools. Trash, High Channeler Ravati. This is the mob before the last boss. And Tempest Channeler's Lightning Storm now deals damage every 1 second, was 0.5. So again, another 50% nerf in damage. These guys trucked unfortified. This is a good change. This is really hard to heal. Especially with stuff like Sanguine healing these mobs. They would sometimes get off 4 or 5 storms, and it was hell. So this is a good change. Kairaka and Eckert Stormvane. This is the last boss, the Dragon plus Troll combo. Inferno Core, this is when the dragon breathes on like 3 or 4, I think it's 3 random players. And they gave them stacks of a debuff, and as the debuff ticked, it would drop the flame patches on the ground and do a bunch of damage. So damage reduced by 25%, but duration increased to 4 seconds. So less damage over a little more time. That gives the healer more time to react. That's perfect. You won't instantly die. I mean, so overall, most of these changes make a lot of sense to me. There are some ones I would still like to be looked at. Some stuff in Halls of Infusion to Uldaman specifically. Some of the boss design in Uldaman is awful, and the trash in Halls of Infusion between second and third boss, and then the last boss is just terrible. It should be looked at. There needs to be something there, some kind of adjustment. But anyway, pretty happy with these changes. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. I'll probably do a couple more videos related to this, maybe some more hero talent reviews. We'll see. But anyway, you can follow me, twitch.tv/Veronix, and we'll see you on the next one. Peace.